Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Uh, we are going to start Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, uh, fourth canto, 12th chapter, slok number 13. So, uh, first we will recite Mangalacharan, then we will start Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayo Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Avatreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki Mukam Karati Vachalam Pongam Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Bande Shikuram Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Suchaitanya Visharam Om Tassat. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, you can see in screen, 4th canto, 12th chapter, slok number 13. Dhruva Maharaj goes back to Godhead. Satrimit, Satrim, Satrim Sadvarsha Sahasram, Sasasachishti Mandalam, Ugai Punna Kshayam Kurvan, Abogair Asuvakshayam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Dhruva Maharaj ruled over his planet for 36,000 years. He diminished the reactions of pious activities by enjoyment. And by practicing austerities, he diminished inauspicious reactions. Purport that Dhruva Maharaj ruled over the planet for 36,000 years means that he was present in the Satya Yuga, because in the Satya Yuga people used to live for 100,000 years. In the next Yuga, Treta, people used to live for 10,000 years. And in the next Yuga, Dwapara, for 1,000 years. And in the present age, the Kali Yuga, the maximum duration of life is 100 years. With the change of the yugas, the duration of life and memory, the quality of kindness, and all other good qualities diminish. There are two kinds of activities, namely pious and impious. By executing pious activities, one can gain facilities for higher material enjoyment. But due to impious activities, one has to undergo severe distress. A devotee, however, is not interested in enjoyment or affected by distress. When he is prosperous, he knows, I am diminishing the results of my pious activities. And when he is in distress, he knows, I am diminishing the reactions of my impious activities. A devotee is not concerned with enjoyment or distress. He simply desires to execute devotional service. It is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam that devotional service should be apratihata, unchecked by the material conditions of happiness or distress. The devotee undergoes process of austerity such as observing Ekadasi and similar other fasting days, and refraining from illicit sex life, intoxication, gambling, and meditating. Thus, he becomes purified from the reactions of his past impious life, and because he engages in devotional service, which is the most pious activity, he enjoys life without separate endeavor. Text 14. Ivam bahu sabam kalam Mahatma Vichalendriya Trivarga Upaikam Mutva Uttayadan Nipasanam. Translation and purport by His Divine A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The self-controlled great soul Dhruva Maharaj thus passed many years favorably executing three kinds of worldly activities, namely religiosity, economic development, and satisfaction of all material desires. Thereafter, he handed over the charge of the royal throne to his son. Purport. Perfection of materialistic life is suitably attained by the process of observing religious principles. This leads automatically to successful economic development, and thus there is no difficulty in satisfying all material desires. Since Dhruva Maharaj, as a king, had to keep up his status quo, or it would not have been possible to rule over the people in general. He did it perfectly, but as soon as he saw that his son was grown up and could take charge of the royal throne, he immediately handed over the charge and retired from all material engagements. One word used here is very significant, abichalendriya, which means that he was not disturbed by the agitation of the senses, nor was his sensory power diminished. Although in years he was a very old man, since he ruled over the world for 36,000 years. Naturally, one may conclude that he became very old, but factually, his senses were very young, and yet he was not interested in sense gratification. In other words, he remained self controlled. He performed his duties perfectly according to the materialistic way. That is the way of behavior of great devotees. Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, one of the direct disciples of Lord Chaitanya, was the son of a very rich man. Although he had no interest in enjoying material happiness, when he was interested with doing something in managing the state, he did it perfectly. Srila Gaurasundar advised him, from within keep yourself and your mind completely aloof, but externally execute the material duties just as they need to be done. The transcendental position can be achieved by devotees only, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, while others, such as yogis, try to control their senses by force. Devotees, even though possessing full sensory powers, do not use them because they engage in higher transcendental activities. Text 15. Manmana idam vishwam manyamana idam vishwam maya rachitam atmani avidya rachita swapna gandharva nagaropamam. Translation. Srila Dhruva Maharaj realized that this cosmic manifestation bewilders living entities like a dream or Pantas Magoria, because it is a creation of the illusory external energy of the Supreme Lord. Purport. In the deep forest, it sometimes appeared that there are big palaces and nice cities. That is technically called Gandharva Nagara. Similarly, in dreams also we create many false things out of imagination. A self-realized person or a devotee knows well that this material cosmic manifestation is a temporary, illusory representation appearing to be truth. It is like a phantasmagoria. But behind this shadow creation, there is reality, the spiritual world. Devotee is interested in the spiritual world, not its shadow. Since he has realization of the supreme truth, a devotee is not interested in this temporary shadow of truth. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Param Drishta Nivartate. Text 16. आत्मस्त्री अपत्या सुहृदो बलं विद्धकोशम् अंतापुरं परिविहार भुवश्चरम्या भूमण्डलं जलधिमिकलम् अकल्या कलोपशिष्टम् इति सा प्रययौ विशालाम्. Translation: This Dhruva Maharaj at the end left his kingdom, which extended over the earth and was bounded by the great oceans. He considered his body, his wives, his children, his friends, his army, his rich treasury, his very comfortable palaces, and his many enjoyable pleasure grounds to be creations of the illusory energy. Thus, in due course of time, he retired to the forest in the Himalayas known as Badrika Ashram. Purport: In the beginning of his life, when he went to the forest in search of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Dhruva Maharaj realized that all bodily conceptions of pleasure are products of the illusory energy. In the very beginning, of course, he was after the kingdom of his father, and in order to get it, he went to search for the Supreme Lord. But he later realized that everything is the creation of the illusory energy. From the acts of Srila Dhruva Maharaj, we can understand that somehow or other, if one becomes Krishna conscious, it does not matter what his motivation is in the beginning. He will eventually realize the real truth by the grace of the Lord. In the beginning, Dhruva Maharaj was interested in the kingdom of his father, but later he became a great devotee, Mahabhagavata, and had no interest in material enjoyment. The perfection of life can be achieved only by the devotees. Even if one completes only a minute percentage of devotional service and then falls down from his immature position, he is better than a person who fully engages in the fruitive activities of this material world. Text 17. Tasham Vishuddha Karana Shivavar Vigaha Badvasanam Jitamarum Manas Manasahas Manasahas Trikaksha स्थूले दधार भगवत प्रतिरूपा एतद् ध्यामा ध्यायांस्तद् अव्यवहितो व्यसृजत् समाधौ. Translation: In Badrika Ashram, Dhruva Maharaj's senses became completely purified because he bathed regularly in the crystal clear purified water. He fixed his sitting position and by yogic practice controlled the breathing process and the air of life. In this way, his senses were completely withdrawn. Then he concentrated his mind on the Archa Vigraha from the form of the Lord, which is the exact replica of the Lord, and thus meditating upon him entered into complete trance. Purport: Here is the description of the Ashtanga Yoga system to which Dhruva Maharaj was already accustomed. Ashtanga Yoga was never meant to be practiced in a fashionable city. Dhruva Maharaj went to Badrika Ashram and in a solitary place alone he practiced yoga. He concentrated his mind on the Archa Vigraha, the worshipable deity of the Lord, which exactly represents the Supreme Lord, and thus thinking constantly of the deity. He become absorbed in trance. Worship of the Archa Vigraha is not ideal worship. The Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Lord in a form of appreciable by a devotee. Therefore, devotees engaged in the temple in the service of the Lord as Archa Vigraha, a form made of stula material objects such as stone, metal, wood, jewels, or paint. All of these are called stula or physical representations, since the devotees follow the regulative principles of worship. Even though the Lord is there in his physical form, is not different from his original spiritual form. Thus, the devotees gets the benefit of achieving the ultimate goal of life, that is to say, becoming always absorbed in thought of the Lord. This, ins- this incessant thought of the Lord as prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita makes one the topmost yogi. Text 18. Bhaktim haro bhagavati prabhahan ajasram anand baspa kalaya muhur ardiya mana vikli mana hidaya pulakachi tango natmanam asmarat asab iti muktalinga. Translation: because of his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes, his heart melted, and there was shivering and standing of the hairs all over his body. Thus transformed in a trance of devotional service, Dhruva Maharaj completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. Purport: due to constant engagement in devotional service, hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping the deity, etc., as prescribed in the 9 varieties, there are different symptoms which appear in the body of a devotee. These 8 bodily transformations, which indicate that a devotee is already liberated within himself, are called Ashtasattvic Vikara. When a devotee completely forgets his bodily existence, he should be understood to be liberated. He is no longer engaged in the body. The example is given that when a coconut becomes completely dry, the coconut pulp within the coconut shell separates from the bondage of the shell and the outer covering. By moving the dry coconut, one can hear that the pulp within is no longer attached to the shell or to the covering. Similarly, when one is fully absorbed in the devotional service, he is completely disconnected from the two material coverings, the subtle and gross bodies. Dhruva Maharaj actually attained this stage of life by constantly discharging devotional service. He has already been described as a Mahabhagavata, for unless one becomes a Mahabhagavata or a first class pure devotee, the symptoms are not visible. Lord Chaitanya exhibited all these symptoms. Thakur Haridas also exhibited them, and there are many pure devotees who manifested such bodily symptoms. They are not to be imitated, but when one is actually advanced, the symptoms are exhibited. At that time, it is to be understood that a devotee is materially free. Of course, from the beginning of devotional service, the path of liberation immediately opens. Just as the coconut taken from the tree immediately begins to dry, it simply takes some time for the shell and pulp to separate from one another. An important word in this verse is Mukta Linga. Mukta means liberated, and Linga means the subtle body. When a man dies, he quits the gross body, but the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego carries him to a new body. While existing in the present body, the same subtle body carries him from one stage of life to another. For example, from childhood to boyhood by mental development. The mental condition of a baby is different from that of a boy. The mental condition of a boy is different from that of a young man, and the mental condition of a young man is different from that an old man. So at death, The process of changing bodies takes place due to the subtle body. The mind, intelligence, and ego carry the soul from one gross body to another. This is called transmigration of the soul. But there is another stage when one becomes liberated even from the subtle body. At that time, the living entity is competent and fully prepared to be transferred to the transcendental or spiritual world. The description of the bodily symptoms of Sri Dhruva Maharaj makes it apparent that he become perfectly fit to be transferred to the spiritual world. One can experience the distinction between the subtle and gross bodies even daily. In a dream, one's gross body is lying on the bed while the subtle body carries the soul, the living entity, to another atmosphere. But because the gross body has to be continued, the subtle body comes back. The subtle body comes back and settles in the present gross body. Therefore, one has to become free from the subtle body also. This freedom is known as Mukta Linga. 4.12.19 Shadadarsabhimanangriam nabhasho bataradruba viprajayad dasadhisho rakapatim iboditam. Translation: as soon as the symptoms of his liberation were manifest, he saw a very beautiful airplane coming down from the sky as if the brilliant full moon were coming down, illuminating all the 10 directions. Purport: there are different levels of acquired knowledge. Direct knowledge, knowledge received from the authorities; transcendental knowledge, knowledge beyond the senses; and finally, spiritual knowledge. When one surpasses the stage of acquiring knowledge by the descending process, he is immediately situated on the transcendental platform. Dhruva Maharaj, being liberated from the material concept of life, was situated in transcendental knowledge and could perceive the presence of a transcendental airplane which was brilliant as the full moonlight. This is not possible in the stages of direct or indirect perception of knowledge. Such knowledge is a special favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can, however, rise to this platform of knowledge by the gradual process of advancing in devotional service or Krishna consciousness. Look 4.12.20. तत्रनु देवा प्रबरौ चतुर्भुजौ संयमौ किशोर अरुणां भुजेक्षणौ स्थित्वा स्थितितव स्थितितव स्थितव अवस्तभ्य गदं सुभाससौ किरीटाहरङ्गदा चरु कुण्डलौ. Translation: Dhruva Maharaj saw two very beautiful associates of the Lord Vishnu in the plain. They had 4 hands and a blackish bodily luster. They were very youthful, and their eyes were just like reddish lotus flowers. They held clubs in their hands, and they were dressed in very attractive garments with helmets and were decorated with necklaces, bracelets, and earrings. But the inhabitants of Vishnu Lok are of the same bodily feature of the Lord Vishnu, and they also hold club, counsel, lotus flower, and disc. In this verse, it is distinctly stated that they had 4 hands and were nicely dressed. The description of their bodily decorations corresponds exactly to that of Vishnu. So the two uncommon personalities who descended from the airplane came directly from Vishnu Loka or the planet where Lord Vishnu lives. So today we'll stop here. From tomorrow we can continue. We'll continue from slok 21. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Prabhupada Srila Guru Maharaj ki jai, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव भक्त वृंद की जय, जनिताय गो श्री